Well, it's finally time for us to discuss the most debated topic in all of film history. Rafe Fiennes, Ralph Fiennes, Ray Fiennes. What's going on here?
So it's Ray Fiennes. We're here to talk about him and his career and the new movie Conclave. This is Karan from Los Angeles.
This is Alex from Los Angeles, and welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We are two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a filmmaker, actor, director, or other creative who shaped our love of movies. Join us as we explore why they matter and review the 3 movies in their filmography that made the biggest impact on us.
Yeah, so I was thinking about Ray Fiennes since when have I kind of known him and his work? It was hard to pin down because I feel like I've kind of, or he's been in my movie mind for kind of ever. I couldn't exactly place when did I start watching his movies and what have you. So it sort of shows how omnipresent he's been. He's one of those actors who to me is like a leading man but also a character actor, also this kind of shapeshifter genre actor, obviously a well acclaimed classically trained actor. It's kind of a signature careers as I was thinking about him. There are not that many people who have this kind of broad mass appeal, and obviously we'll hopefully get into the Harry Potter of it all. Like that obviously changes things. Like if he doesn't have that, his career is probably very different. But I think what I like about him is that shape-shifting quality, that he can
Mm-hmm.
sort of slot himself kind of into anything and he brings a lot of gravitas with him. But the signature thing that I jumped at me, I guess, after rewatching all these movies and like thinking about him is that there's always something off with him. He's a very charming, attractive guy, but there's always something off with him. And he's always playing with that level of offness in
Mm-hmm.
all of his movies. And sometimes that's dialed up to evil, sometimes that dialed up to comedic, sometimes it's dialed up to kind of annoying, creepy. But there's always something off, and there's something very seductive about that, that you don't know if you trust this person or not, but you're drawn to them no matter what. And I think that's sort of his signature quality. Not to mention his signature look. Like he's a good looking guy, but there's something about I this is revealing too much about me. When I talk to somebody face to face and look at them, I always look at their mouth area. I don't know why. I've always
Hmm.
had this. Like people look
Interesting.
at people in their
In their
eyes or
eyes,
forehead or
yeah.
other places.
Yeah.
I always look at the mouth
Huh.
area. This is where
Okay.
my eyes go.
Hmm.
And he has this extended kind of area between the nose and the first lip, which
Interesting.
is transfers very easily to the Voldemort makeup as well. But I
Yeah, he has
always
no.
found that so odd
Huh.
that it's like a lot, and it's sort of his signature look, I think, which adds to that offness because it's not a classically good-looking male trait, I would think, but it kind of makes him who he is and kind of very memorable in that sense. So to me, like he's a very interesting actor that I would always line up to see whatever he does next. Yeah, that's my relationship with him. What about you?
Yeah, with me, it was interesting because as I was thinking about this a lot too, I was actually comparing him to another actor we covered in one of our bonus episodes last fall in Hugh Grant, who started out as a leading man and then kind of basically Hugh Grant became a character actor. I think Ray Fiennes had a similar kind of career path where in the 90s he comes out, he's this leading man in these big films, and that's what I originally knew him from. We'll talk about the first movie that made me notice him, but you know, obviously he had Schindler's List, who was getting critical acclaim. He was, you know, the guy, the big head on the poster, and then that didn't really work out for him long term. I think he is more of a character actor because, like you said, there is something a little bit off or interesting about him that you don't really want in a leading man. You want him to be a little bit bland. That's sort of the point of a leading man, and I don't think he can pull that off well enough. And then he started finding a second half of his career that is in as a character actor, whether he's even the lead amongst other character actors or like in the Harry Potter franchise, which is basically a magnet for, you know, amazing British character actors. He can slot easily right in there as Voldemort. And I think that maybe is because I think actually, maybe I need to look at his mouth more, but I always thought he was very like conventionally and classically attractive. And he has like a face of a guy and sort of an air about him where you can kind of let this guy get away with anything. You're not really going to question it. Maybe he comes across as, oh, I think I'm smart, or I think, I'm a nice guy, even though he's really stupid and a mean guy. But you just sort of let that happen. That whole thing about attractive people can get away with anything. He has those looks, but because there's something else that he can do with his acting and the roles that he chooses, there's a little more complexity
Hmm.
behind his good looks. You sort of start questioning the character a little bit more. And I think, especially as I was watching the films that we just watched, it is a lot of that where like these characters can kind of get away with stuff because he's just a good looking guy. But really there's more things going on behind this person. Maybe they're more complicated than they seem, or not who they seem, or not who they're projecting of like this perfect moral guy. Actually, maybe there's referencing Conclave a little bit here. There's some more complexity behind the role that he is inhabiting, even though at first glance you might think, oh, okay, like he's just this perfect guy. So I definitely, because he started out sort of I don't want to say like matinee idol, but they were trying to make him a leading man in the 90s. That was what I originally associated with him. I kind of thought, oh, this career is kind of dead. And then as he starts coming back as this really interesting character actor, especially in one of the movies we're going to be talking about later in his career, the Grand Budapest, I was like, wow, this guy like can command the screen in a role that kind of, perfect for him, and can be really funny too. I think that's something that
Hmm.
he sort of realized later in his career, that he couldn't really pull off the sort of again, matinee idol bland leading man thing. But when it's a comedy, or he can lean into these eccentricities, like he's very good at that. And maybe it
Yeah.
is because of his good looks. I don't know.
It's all of it, right? Like there's the offness, but there's also an intelligence to him
Hmm.
in addition to the good looks, but also comedic chops. Like, yeah, and that sort of comes through. And that's where there's, to your point, like there's more depth and complexity to him. Although I never took him as a leading man.
Mm.
Like to me, he is the second lead in Schindler's List. Like I was looking at his IMDb career.
Right,
It's sort of
right, right.
interesting that that was his like first movie pretty much.
Hmm.
And then because that was the big deal, they tried to kind of put him, but that didn't go on for very long.
No, it
I
didn't work.
To me, like
Yeah,
Hugh Grant was always a leading man. It's only in his later career now that he's kind of become this character actor person, but
correct. Yeah.
like he never was. Like after English Patient and maybe a few other movies, I mean, that was sort of it. But it's interesting, like even those movies, now when I think about, or I rewatch some of them, he's not playing your average leading man even in those roles. Like there's something more to it. There's something off to him even in those roles, which sometimes works and maybe sometimes doesn't work. Their mileage might vary on that. I know this for sure that whatever he's doing, it'll always be interesting, and how many people can we say that about?
No, no, exactly. And the fact that he also was able to slot himself into like two major franchises with Harry
Yeah.
Potter and James Bond in the last 15 years, and have that not overshadow his career either, I think is admirable, and just shows that
Yeah.
he took those roles because he was good. He could give something to them, as opposed to out of desperation to kind of save his
Yeah.
career because it wasn't working out the way that maybe he wanted. I mean, who knows whether he wanted to be a leading man or not? Obviously,
I don't
audiences
think
rejected
so.
him. Yeah,
Doesn't feel
I don't
like
think
to
so
me.
either. Yeah.
Like
Hopefully
even
not.
in
I don't
the
think it's
earlier movies of like Red Dragon and whatever, like I remember like he's walking around naked with
hmm
like all this tattoos and things on his back. Like no leading man early in their career would want to do that. He's always been out there and not
hmm
afraid. Like he's unflinching in that sense.
He's an actor that I definitely will be continuing to enjoy his movies into the future. And speaking of future, I guess this is relative recent past,
Yeah.
but Conclave. Are we ready to enter the Conclave and discuss his new
Yeah.
film? The summary of the film. So this is Conclave. It's the IMDb plot summary. When Cardinal Lawrence is tasked with leading one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, selecting a new pope, he finds himself at the center of a conspiracy that could shake the very foundation of the Catholic Church. This is directed by Edward Berger, starring Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow, and also Isabella Rossellini. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I was there at midnight show, Chinese theater, IMAX 3D. I was in my costume. All the Conclave heads were there. It was a huge
Wow.
event. Yeah, I got my popcorn bucket. They have the Vatican, reconstruction of the Vatican in there. It was huge.
Not the
Um,
Pope hat.
I had the Pope hat, but I had to take it off. Obviously,
Right.
when the movie started, that would have been a little distracting to all my other clave heads out there that were just chopping at the bit for this movie. That was obviously a joke. However, I did go see this yesterday at 10 a.m. At a screen, and it was almost full. And the ticket taker was like, "Why
Wow.
are so many people seeing this movie?" And I'm like, it's freaking Conclave. Everyone loves the Cardinals." But like, she was like, "What's going on?" And it was like for a 10 a.m. show
Wow,
at the
it's
Grove,
impressive.
it was full. I'll start with my kind of high level take, and then we can discuss Ray Fiennes more particularly. So I actually went into this movie. I probably wouldn't have seen this if it were not for this podcast. Honestly, this was not on my radar. The director directed the All Quiet on the Western Front film from previous year, which I did not enjoy. So I probably would have avoided this movie because he was involved. The trailers didn't look interesting to me, but I really loved this movie. I thought it was just super enjoyable, like pulpy in the right areas, serious in the right areas, incredible acting performances, incredible set design, music. I loved the score. I love the sound design. And actually, about halfway through this movie, which we'll get into this more when we kind of get into the film, like I realized, like to me, this seemed to be a big allegory for just the state of Western democracy over the last like 5 to 6 years. I was reading a lot into the last two American presidential elections, the recent elections in France over the summer. Like this seemed to be a direct commentary and reflection on
Hmm.
poor state, I should say, of Western democracy. But at the center of it all, too, Ray Fiennes, I think this might be one of his best performances, if not his best. I'd only seen it once. I mean, this was yesterday, so maybe there's some recency bias here. But he just did a fantastic job holding this whole movie together in a character where, again, he's on the face of it, he's trying to be this like better than everyone else, follow the rules, holier than thou, not in like an arrogant way, but it was, look, we got to follow the rules. We got to follow the rules. We have this
Right.
process.
I'm not even interested. I'm
I'm
not
not
even into it.
interested. I'm not going to get involved. And yet he's like breaking every rule, sneaking into the dead Pope's room to steal this stuff, and does this Mean Girls thing with the burn book at a certain point in the movie. So it's just interesting that like this guy, who again, like I was saying before, he comes across as someone who's, oh, this guy's going to be a good guy. Then it's Ray Fiennes. He's got a nice face, even despite his mouth thing, I guess. But eventually he ends up being sort of just as political as the rest of the characters in the film. So yeah, high recommend from me, but curious to hear your thoughts and kind of let's dive more into the film.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to this movie ever since I heard it because I heard that it played really well in the film festivals where it debuted. I love the cast. I actually liked the movie that Edward Berger did before, so I was curious to see because it's such a different scale and note from All Quiet on the Western Front. So kind of
Hmm.
curious to see what someone like him would do with this material and a cast like this. And I also find this topic very interesting, I think. This is such an age-old institution. How do you make something that feels relevant to our times today in this set in this world? Not to mention the beauty and everything that comes with it, whether it's costumes and such. So I was really looking forward to it. And to your point, yeah, it delivered. I really enjoyed it. Like I love how you put it. Like it's not a self-serious movie.
Mm-mm.
It's a thriller, pulpy movie. It's an airport novel kind of movie that's been elevated. It's almost like a movie that was made in the 90s a lot.
Yeah.
Although, if
Hmm.
this were made in the 90s, they will underline, underscore the point that they are making to whatever current allegory. And to me, that's sort of the triumph of the movie. At first, when I saw it a week ago or so. I was like, oh, so what was this all about? Like it felt fun and engaging and interesting and beautiful to look at and kind of pulpy, but what's the point? And as the week went by, like you were saying, the allegories with the current world, the Western civilization, hell, why even go there? Just what happens in our companies and at work. There's politics of this nature where people are playing games of sorts and you can't really judge the book by its cover. That's happening all the time, right? So it's
Hmm.
very prescient. It always will be. But I love that the movie doesn't underline that. It feels kind of nonchalant about that. It's up to you as an audience to kind of draw those connections to your own life or to what's happening in the world. So I love that about this movie. And then the mise en scène, like we talk a lot about on this podcast, like everything comes together really well in every department. But I think the biggest turn of the movie is in the performances, and
Hmm.
everything is just kind of in service of that, which I really enjoy. Like they aren't, I mean, there are some great dialogues and scenes, but it's mostly about glances and what is unsaid. And that's where I think the mise en scène really comes to shine, where the music is sort of amping things up or making you wonder what's happening right at the get-go. The music is kind of comical in a
Great.
way.
Yeah, I loved the music a lot.
Yeah, and I was
Yeah.
like, what is happening? It kind of reminded me of May December a little bit, or the beginning
Oh,
of how it had this kind of this pulpy kind of soap opera music. But then it sort of becomes a lot more involved as you go through it. But this was a good one. Probably the first movie I've seen this year where I was leaned forward in my chair in the
yeah.
theater.
Yeah, this is the yeah, it was one of the best movies I've seen this year so far. I mean, I know we're going into like the end of the year award season part, so
Yeah.
maybe there'll be other surprises like this. But again, for me, it was a surprise. Like I was not anticipating this being so pulpy and enjoyable. Like they really do dial up these thriller elements. It's not just like a stodgy movie of
No,
people sitting in a room talking about Catholic dogma or something. It's not it's the setting is the Catholic Church electing a new pope, but it really isn't about
it could be anywhere.
religion, right? It could be any government doing something. Actually, one other thing that this movie reminded me of a little bit was the movie Death of Stalin, which is
Oh yeah.
more of a comedy and a farce, but a similar thing. Like the leader of the Soviet Union dies, and everyone's trying to position themselves for who's going to be the next, replacement to Stalin. Again, that's more of a comedic tone, whereas this movie was kind of the same thing. The Pope dies, and these cardinals are trying to figure out, okay, how can I be the one, but not make it seem like I'm the one, but like I gotta do these backroom deals, and it's all politics. And I think that is what this movie sort of is saying, and that it's not good or bad, that it's all like politics by definition isn't bad. I know we that phrase is used a lot, especially in like the workplace. Oh, it's so political. But yeah, like
Mhm.
everything is political. That's not a good or bad. Politics is not good or bad by definition. It just sort of is what it is. And this movie, I think, is kind of exemplifying that, and that it really just is all just about the politics. The church piece of it, there's some moments I think that we're trying to make potentially some comments on, religion and faith. There's a lot
Right.
of, great things that Ray Fiennes' character says about faith and doubt. And I think those things are really cool, but they don't also apply to religion. I think that can definitely apply to government. I mean, faith and democracy is the same thing. You have to have doubt in that will the people make the right decision, but you have to
Right.
have faith that the process and the whole idea of voting is important in and of itself. And sometimes people make mistakes. Votes are cast in the ways that you might disagree with, and maybe looking back, the people made the wrong decision. But if you believe in the democratic process, eventually, as long as the democratic process is protected, eventually the people could change and correct those past mistakes. I mean, the entire history of the United States is that it's all
Hmm.
bad decisions that are gradually undone over the years, maybe too late, in my opinion, a lot of the times, but eventually the people do make the right
Hmm.
decision. It can just take a lot of time and in the process. And I think that what this movie is sort of reminding you of a little bit, whereas not to just get too pessimistic or, doom pilled as the kids call it about just the state of things. This is how it works. You have to be kind of open to that.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, going back to Ray Fiennes a little bit, I think what we've been saying, like somebody who's very centered, seductive, attractive, you think they're in the right, but you also know all along that there's something off. That's very much true in this performance, but I think it's in a different key. Like in
Hmm.
all the other movies that we'll cover, that key is often dialed up to evil effect or comedic effect or
Hmm.
zany effect or what have you. This is like so low key, which of course he's done the low key kind of key in other roles, but not in this sort of context of being off, but also the lead of the movie where we are supposed to follow him and supposed to trust him. So the movie's doing a number on you, but so is he doing a number
Hmm.
on you, but also all the other fellow cardinals and cast members. So it's pretty meta in that sense, which I found very interesting. And it was fun to see him be so restrained and just so low key. I'll use that word again. And there's just so much gravitas around that. And he's playing with your allegiances all along, just the way he's playing the Cardinals, which was really fun to see him that. And also he bodies the whole costume
Hmm.
and the whole setup so well that it doesn't feel out of place. It feels like, oh, you've been here.
Right.
That's the other thing. Like great actors are shapeshifters, and he always commits and kind of dissolves in the character. You forget that it's him, but you also know that it's him, which is such a great quality. I think that's sort of my favorite. Yeah, the more I think about it, my favorite leading men or leading ladies are character actors.
Hmm.
This is why I love Meryl so much. Like
Right.
they have this lead charisma that you want to watch them, you can't take your eyes off them, but they're also not just the same person in every movie, but yet you see a little bit of them. It's
Hmm.
just such a indescribable fine thing, and he's able to do that, and this is probably up there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think in terms of him being the main character in this movie too, and with the persona and things you're talking about, I think his character is meant to be sort of the audience surrogate, or the audience
Yeah,
feels like, these are just squabbling cardinals, and like I'm above all this. Like, why would I have so much passion? Stanley Tucci's character is sort of screaming, "You have to pick a side!" Like he's getting
yeah,
all animated, and John Lithgow is getting animated, and there's the more conservative, Italian cardinal who also is very big in these performances. But Ray
yeah,
Fiennes like, no, 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 I'm even keeled. Like everything's fine. I'm kind of above all this. But in actuality, he's totally not. Like he has to examine himself. Like, you know what? I actually kind of want this. And then he's doing all these different things to sabotage his competition, essentially. Though in his mind, he's telling himself he's doing that because he's meant to be the one holding up the rules and doing what the Pope, would have wanted. Even though in the end of the day, you find out the old Pope is actually playing politics too by bringing in the guy from Afghanistan into the picture and
hmm,
keeping that all secret. And it's like you can't kind of go into this and pretend that you are the one that is the only sort of chaste or just one who's just following the rules. And I think as an audience, you come in and you think, oh yeah, no, I'm the reasonable guy. I care more about the rules, and why would I play politics? And you sort of follow him along on that journey. And at the end, which I don't think we should get in actually to spoilers because there are some pretty big
no,
spoilers in this film, but I think the end is like a huge big shock to Ray Fiennes, and it really tests his entire worldview. To like, well, I claimed I was this, and I claim that I'm more on the Stanley Tucci, more liberal side of the church. But like, wow, am I really? Like when it's put to the test, it's easy to say things, but it's very hard to actually act on those things. And I think that's what Ray Fiennes is finding out throughout this entire movie is he's the, oh, I'm just gonna follow the rules guy. Easy to say, but he absolutely doesn't throughout this whole
yeah,
thing. And he becomes
yeah,
even more political in a way than the rest of these cardinals because he's manipulating the entire process by bringing forth the documents on John Lithgow's character, or telling the African cardinal to basically he has to resign,
right,
and telling him that, like, how can you get more manipulative than that? But he
yeah,
tells himself that he's not, and because it's Ray Fiennes, and you again a face that I think you can trust and believe this is a good guy, that you sort of believe it. But then the movie challenged that thing the whole way through, which I think is so what's so brilliant about it, and why I think that also is sort of the I would think maybe commentary. Maybe I'm bringing my own kind of political thoughts into this too, but the commentary of the people in these governments, whether it's American elections or French elections or other elections in Europe in the last couple years, these people that try to kind of play both sides or think that no, like I'm not going to pick a side. I'm the enlightened center and look at me, I'm so great. And that those people are like the biggest frauds of all. And I think because they don't have ideals at all. And actually, in this film, like the priest that I most respect, or the cardinal that I kind of most respected, is the guy who isn't really about him. It's about the people, and it's like all this political stuff is sort of all aside. It's like, well, what is the outside world? We can't just shut them out. Which I love that allegory of sort of the way the set was locking them all in, and there's in this room
hmm,
they can't talk about the outside world, even though they're electing a leader for the Catholic Church of all the Catholics around the entire world, and they're forgetting about who they're actually serving, which is the people on the outside, and it's this outsider that actually helps them see that. And this isn't really necessarily spoilers, but I love the moment when at the they lock all the windows, but at the end of the movie, one of the windows is
yeah,
open, and the breeze kind of comes in, and they all sort of look up, and it's like, oh, wait a second, like we've been too much thinking about ourselves this entire
right.
time, just politicians politicking for the sake of themselves. The outside world is out there. We can't ignore it anymore. We have to let
Let
the
it
what we
in.
think the people would want into our decision. And I thought that was just so brilliantly handled through the sound design of the wind coming in, the light of the light of that window. And I think that is a good message too, that these governments sometimes just get too, or most of the time, these politicians, these governments get too focused on themselves and their own politic, and
Right.
they forget what the reason they're there is to serve us as the constituents.
Exactly.
And the one guy was the only guy really that was doing that. Even though Ray Fiennes sort of claimed that he was to himself for most of the time, but you're not. You're playing politics just like the rest of these
Exactly.
guys. I thought that
Exactly.
was really cool.
I totally agree. And yeah, it's such a it's not even an allegory, like it's just literally what we are living through right
That's
now,
right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, you're right. It's
And
not
it's
an
a good
allegory. Yeah.
reminder, right? Like the media can sort of say that this side or that side, and there's always one side that's sort of touted as the side that's sort of more, inclusive or more this, more that. But you have to really, take each person to task and see what their true motivations are. It
Right.
doesn't matter what you're projecting or the fabric that you put on your back. It's about what you stand for
Right.
and what are you driving for. And I think Rafe's character is very much that on the
Hmm.
outside you would think that, oh yeah, he's the best, and that changes throughout the movie, and it becomes, he actually, to your point, ends up being the worst of all of them, even
Hmm.
more so than the Italian guy. At least that guy, what
Right.
he's saying.
Exactly.
I
Right.
would rather take that as opposed to somebody who's just so shrouded in all this that you can't even trust. um,
Exactly.
but the brilliance of his performances is that he himself is in turmoil with himself without
Hmm.
even saying anything. There are no grand sort of confessional scenes or breakdown scenes, but it's all, now I'll move to another part of his face. It's all in the forehead and the eyes.
Oh, you looked up there, huh? You did
I
eventually.
did go up there. It's like all the weight is there,
Hmm.
of him. Because I don't, there is a part of him, like, I'm sure, great actors, they construct backstories and things like that. I'm sure he constructed it for himself that maybe at one point he was righteous. Maybe he did want what's right for the people. And over time, that thing has sort of just changed and diminished. So it's not totally gone, it's still there, but
Hmm.
there are all these other forces that are pulling him, and you see that happen throughout the movie, that he almost looks a little bit different at the end of the movie than
He
he did from the
does.
beginning, which is
Hmm.
so brilliant. I will say, we won't spoil it, but the whole thing at the end, it is a little bit on the nose and maybe even comical,
Hmm.
that it sort of, to be honest, took me out of the movie a little bit. And this is why the movie for me came from, like, really, really good to, I mean, I still really like it and really
Hmm.
enjoy it, but it sort of just came down a little bit because that just felt like so, I don't know, like the pulp
Trashy,
sort of,
pulpy. Yeah.
it became a little much with
Yeah.
that whole reveal at the end.
Which that's based on a book, and they
Yeah.
dialed the reveal back to not be as extreme as what they do in the book. Apparently, I looked that up because I was like, is this the ending in the book? Like, I'm surprised. Because yeah, that was definitely a moment of like, oh my God, like, wait, what's going on? Like the tone of the movie seems to shift a
Yeah.
lot into something else. But then when I was thinking back on it, the whole movie kind of has that tone because
Yeah. The whole
there are
movie
these
has the
amazing
tone.
performances, and especially
Yeah.
the way that the director handles this stuff. They're like elevating like a dime store novel or airport paperback, and then the plot sort of catches up with that, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that right, this movie is that, so I'll kind of give it that. But it definitely at first was like, wait a
It's
second, is this whole
silly.
movie just kind of silly? But again, I think a lot of it, there's some messages that you can say back onto the
Yeah.
to the rest of the film around, like, it's the other issues that some of these other cardinals had were all about things that they did and not who they were. And I think that is an important message too. Like John
Mm,
Lithgow, it's like he did bad things, and same thing with the other the African priest who had to step, or the
mhm.
cardinal, sorry, I'm getting these, apologies to the Catholics out there, so maybe I'm misassigning some of these folks, but these are flaws that they were in their actions, right, as opposed to just a person sort of existing. And I don't know, I think it worked for me the more I thought about it, even though initially I was like, wait a second, like, is this movie just turning into something super silly, I guess is the best way to put it. But I think they
Yeah.
handled it well, and I also think that scene is some of Ray Fiennes' in terms of the movie, that reveal and how his reaction to that as a character, I think was one of his strongest moments, because it is really putting his entire ideology
Hmm.
at test. And then also that thing of like, wait, I just played politics, and like maybe I should have played politics actually even more to try to like correct this, because like what else is going to happen? Like they're thinking about the political ramifications and everything, instead of where he tried to, I feel like his character learned by the end that piece of it, we're forgetting about, the people and who we're here to
Right.
serve, and what their, the Catholic parishioners out there think and what they would want. And then he reverts back to like, wait a second, like actually no, maybe it is important to think about all this political stuff. But then it's fine. Like you can, I saw at least in him this whole sort of like he went through the whole movie in his head again about everything that had just happened, and I thought that was a great job of what Rafe was able to do. And I think the best his my favorite scene of his in the movie was that at the end when he's talking to the new pope, and just their scene together was like, oh my gosh, like not only
Crazy.
shocking and silly because of the plot kind of stuff, but his performance I thought was excellent.
And
Just
that's
was
what
impressed with
elevates it, right? Like it's
it.
pulpy and silly, but it's grounded in like amazing, fully rounded, deep, complex performances led by him and
Hmm.
all the departments in service of that. And
Oh yeah.
it's a treat.
High recommend this movie. It's a big crowd pleaser, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
I think
I
this
think everybody's
plays,
gonna like this, no matter who
yeah,
you are.
yeah. My audience, which was a mix of older people and younger people, that my full audience at 10 a.m. yesterday, everyone seemed to really like it. They, were gasping at the right moments and
Mhm.
laughing at the moments that were meant to be kind of laughed to. So I think it was a hit in my audience of all the conclave heads in their costumes. So
Same. All right, with that, should we jump into our top three? So we do this every week where we cover three movies of the person that we are covering. So the first movie is The First Love, which is basically the movie that made kind of the impact on us personally the first time. Second, we cover a masterpiece, a movie that we think kind of resonates with us the most and sort of is their masterwork. And then third is a wild card, which is a movie that maybe is a bit of a hidden gem or a big swing or maybe even a big miss that they did, but something that still made an impression on us. So with that, Alex, do you want to bring your first love?
sure. So my first love of Ray Fiennes is Quiz Show from 1994. The IMDb plot summary: a young lawyer, Richard Goodwin, investigates a potentially fixed game show. Charles Van Doren, a big time show winner, is under Goodwin's investigation. This movie's directed by Robert Redford, starring Ray Fiennes, John Turturro, and Rob Morrow. And also Martin Scorsese in a rare acting performance. It's fun to see him try his acting chops on for this. So, this is a movie that I saw when it came out on VHS. I didn't go to the theater, but this was definitely the first movie that I saw Ray Fiennes in. I think you had mentioned the first movie he did was Schindler's List, but I didn't see that until I was
Right.
a little bit older. And I thought this he really does. I love the film, which I'll get into in a little bit, but I'll start with Rafe. For me, this really set the tone of like who this actor was and how I even see him to this day. It's I think, very attractive, but sort of waspy, upper class, classy, attractive guy. Very polite, very nice, very intelligent. Like all the things on paper that you put down as like, oh, the perfect sort of like New England, rich white guy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he inhabits this role very, very well. And a lot of when we get into the film, you'll see that this person, because it's based on a real life event, did he basically cheated at this game show, which is not something you ever expect someone who comes from this pedigree to his dad. He was a professor. He was a professor as well, along with his dad. He had this very famous name and pedigree and everything like that. And you would never expect him to be cheating. And that I think has helped. Ray finds this sort of persona of a good-looking guy. You're like, oh, this person, I believe everything that he says. Look at him. Like he's so classy, he's so good-looking, and I think that's why he works so well in this part. And for me, at least, after seeing this film and loving this a lot as a kid, I just always in my mind picture like Ray Fiennes as this type of person initially, and that was really hard for me. Like when he started transitioning more into the zanier character actor stuff, or even Voldemort. It's like Voldemort, like he's supposed to be, a nice New England prep school guy. Like
Yeah.
how is it? Which like, is part of the Voldemort thing. We'll maybe touch on that later. But yeah, like for me, that this sort of set the gold standard of who, in my mind, Ray Fiennes was. And actually, it was interesting because a lot of the adults I remember at the time, because he had done Schindler's List, where he plays this like absolutely evil, like super evil Nazi character, and in their minds, it was like, oh my gosh, he's not playing like bad guys anymore. I'm like, bad guys, like I imagine him as Charles Van Doren. Like that's where I first associated with him. And we'll get a little more into the movie when we talk about it, but that was why this made such an impression on me as a kid. Just again, I love the movie, but really Ray Fiennes in this, I don't necessarily like steals the show, but he's definitely the most interesting character in the movie, so I remember him the most. And what about you? Had you seen a quiz show before, and what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I saw it maybe, I want to say like what, 8, 10 years ago. So I didn't see it when it came out and absolutely loved it. This is a movie that I've seen a few times since because it's those movies that we often say they don't make him like that anymore,
Hmm.
right? And maybe Conclave is in that bucket,
Oh,
but I think this
hmm.
movie is a lot more serious and a lot more intelligent, I think, versus pulpy. Not
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
Conclave isn't intelligent, it is, but it's in a different kind of tone, if you will.
Right.
But yeah, for me, like watching this movie with Rafe later in life, after I had watched this list and some of his other movies, it sort of made all the sense, right? That, oh yeah, this is of course that persona of like somebody who you trust and can get away with anything, but the clues are always there that something is
Hmm.
off. I think what's important with this movie and just Ray's persona is that he's not a bad guy. He's not an idiot. Like
Right.
he's intelligent, and the movie establishes that from the beginning. Like he does know his stuff, maybe not all the way, but there's something broken in him. And I think in this case, it's really this relationship between him and his father, which I think is the driving force. And
Hmm.
again, like directorially and the script wise, that's handled so beautifully with him and his dad. Just like it's kind of a masterclass in acting, just the two of them going at each other, but also the polite and kind of loving moments they have with each other. But he's basically Rafe is like he's a big baby,
Hmm.
who's wanting to be loved and wanting to be seen, and then kind of gets swept up, but there is guilt there. He
Hmm.
does ends up admitting to what he did. So yeah, it's such a fine line, if you will, of somebody who is intelligent but maybe a little bit morally bankrupt, but at the same time comes around, and that's why you root for him.
Hmm.
That's the thing with him, is that even when he's doing all these things in this movie and most of other movies, including Voldemort, there are parts of me that I'm like, go Voldemort, because there's
Oh
something
no, we'll talk
very
about that later. You're one of the Death
impressive
Eaters, huh? Okay.
about that, because it's him. He can pull
Mhm.
that off, I think, So, but yeah, the movie is amazing. Like it's just so well paced, beautifully directed, all the period details, totally in service of the movie. It doesn't feel stodgy. It feels timeless. It feels like this movie was made now or maybe 50 years ago or even 80 years ago. Like it's one of those sort of gems. I almost feel like this movie is a little bit underrated
Yeah.
in Robert Redford's career. Like Ordinary People is absolutely incredible, but this movie kind of is in that top tier for me, for him, because it's just so hard to pull something like this off. And then of course it's based on true events, but the movie plays with you, because when you find out, huge spoiler alert, but this is an old movie, so I'm just going to say it, is
Yeah.
that it's not just Rafe who's been cheating. Everybody's been cheating. The whole
Right.
thing is a cheat.
Hmm.
And it's the system behind all this, driven by media and ad revenue, and which again is such, just so prescient, right? Like we live in the era of clickbait. What is true
Yep.
anymore anyway? So it sort of zooms out. It's no longer about what Rafe did. It's no longer just about him being a big baby and wanting his dad to love him or approve him. It's about something much bigger. And all these people are just kind of pawns in that. And of course, your mileage varies based on where you come from. Ultimately, Rafe is going to be fine. He's going to go
Right.
back. And
Hmm.
within 5 years, he'll have like a new lease on his life versus I don't know what happens to Totoro and his wife.
Right.
Who
Right.
knows? But Totoro is not blameless either. He's cheating
Mm-mm.
as well, and
Hmm.
he's a blabbermouth, and he's going around, digging his own grave. Doesn't treat his wife in the best possible way. So it's a very intelligent movie in that sense. Like a movie, if this movie were made now, it'll be taking sides and giving it to you all on the nose.
Hmm.
But this movie just sort of lets it hang and it lets it breathe, and it's up to you for you to kind of figure out, because like always, people are gray, life is gray. Everybody's in the right and everybody's in the wrong, to varying degrees.
Right. It's the one of those movies, and I tend to kind of gravitate towards films like this anyway, where the system is the issue. And
Yeah,
you can we've done a couple episodes on like movies that impacted our view of America, but I think this definitely could be one
yeah.
around. It's the American dream that is the con to all these people because it doesn't exist, but they're all cheating in their own way to try to achieve that. And yet that
Mm-hmm.
American dream is being packaged and sold to the real suckers, which are the audience, watching these quiz
Mm-hmm.
shows, thinking that this is all real and just so the advertisers can make money. And they're all these the characters that you're mentioning, Totoro and Fiennes, are all part of this game, and so is the network. I mean, they're all part partially to blame in this because the system must monetize this geritol, right, is the product and
Right.
sell forth like what the American dream exists, that you can, if you're smart, you'll get ahead, which is not true actually at
And
all.
in
Like,
this
and
case,
this
quite literally, because it's a quiz show.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like it's putting the whole lie of American meritocracy on display that it actually isn't true, and you're using this character that Ray Fiennes is playing, or a character, this person, right? Ray Fiennes is playing, and I think the interesting thing about him is like he's one of those. I think this was a quote about former President George W. Bush, where born on third base and think they hit a triple attitude, right? You think you accomplished something even though basically everything was handed to you. I think
Mm-hmm.
this Ray Fiennes' character is sort of realizing that over the course of the film that actually, yeah, like I didn't deserve any of this stuff, but I still want it. Like, why can't
Right.
I just go after this because of all the issues and stuff with his dad? And I think that's really what this movie to me is speaking to. It's a condemnation of the system, and then also showing, to your point, how the different classes deal with this. You know, there's the lower class, John Turturro's character. There's the middle class, which is the Richard Goodwin, the investigator. Like they're very much middle class, and then there's the upper class, and how they're all sort of like feeding into the same lie, how it affects them in different ways, and how, to your point, at the end, like who gets to be okay? It's not Turturro. I mean, I don't know what happened to that guy in real life, but it's I
Yeah.
know that at the end of the movie, at least, they said that Charles Van Doren sort of got another job. I don't want to say like died like a hero, but he didn't die like in disgrace when he passed away.
No. Although they did have something for him too, I've forgotten now. I think he kind of became okay too, I think.
Turturro's character, I don't remember actually. So
They did say we should go
they
and
did
look
say,
back.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
We should
that's the
fact check
thing,
ourselves, but that's the
probably,
interesting thing about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
probably varying degrees. But as you were saying, it made me think that there's also something unifying about that because they're all being kind of jerked around by the system. Of course,
Yeah.
they have different, footings from where they come and where they can go back to. But that's the beauty of the thing is that yeah, it might be a lie, but it's also kind of unifying, and
Hmm.
you can look at it from a different point of view that it pushes you to do something,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and otherwise you could just be sitting around and do nothing, which is a lot of countries actually. So,
Hmm.
so that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean the real villain here, to your point, I think is Martin Scorsese's character, which is basically like, the advertiser, right?
Yeah,
Who just
he's
all they want
so
to do
good
is
in it.
sell their like Geritol, which is probably some fake snake oil thing anyway. It's not like they're
Yeah,
even selling something real and helpful to
no,
people. It's a made up fake thing, which I think also is just such a commentary in this whole, hamster wheel thing that we're on called the United States, where it's not even like we're selling anything good to you. It's like a bunch of nothing. But
yeah,
I think that this movie can weave those themes in there, and not to mention also the themes of the Jewish characters versus non-Jewish
right.
characters, and there's a lot of that which is super interesting that I think this movie does very well in terms of handling. Like it's all there in the background, but they're not really forcing that in there. But there's again the people that are okay and the people that aren't in the same way. There's the wasps and then the Jewish folks in this movie, and they're treated very differently.
Yeah, definitely. And then this sort of sliding scale between, American dream average guy versus the beautiful, handsome guy,
Hmm.
what looks better? And the soup du jour changes, to some point. It's
Exactly.
not all or nothing. Because for a degree, the sweaty guy who's from the small town, whatever,
Hmm.
was something people want to root for. But then it
Hmm.
starts to plateau. So there's something very complex about it. Yes, it's about ad revenue, but it's also about human psychology. You root for that person to a point, but then where do you go from there? you
Right.
know this
Right.
happens in our lives. I felt it. I've done this to other people, not to gross degrees, but like it happens. It's also says a lot about who we are as human beings, because
Right.
ultimately those people running the system are also human beings, right? So
Right. The
but
system's bigger than them. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but it was, it's our psychology put on the table, if you will.
Oh,
So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's just they're bringing out these sides of us as humans. We have
yeah,
these things in us. You're right,
yeah,
totally. And they're just playing on those negative traits of humanity to sell their Geritol, whatever
yeah.
Geritol is. But
Whatever Geritol is, which
yeah,
is
no, I
great. They
think
don't
that
even get into it. I don't even remember what it
I,
is.
I don't know. Maybe some of our older listeners might remember fondly using Geritol as a cream or a drink or an oil. I don't even know what it is.
I don't
How
even know
to
what it is.
use
Yeah.
it. But that's not really important. But yeah,
No.
I think this movie, to your point, is underrated and sort of a hidden gem, not only in Ray Fiennes' filmography, just in terms of 90s like period biopic films. I think it's very riveting. It keeps your interest the whole time. I think Robert Redford does a great job. It's definitely as a kid, it was one of my favorite movies. Like I would rent
Yeah.
this a lot on VHS and watch it. Not only do I love it, movies about making TV shows, and there's that element in
Yeah.
it too. I also love, but just it's a great period drama.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel stodgy or like overly manicured. That's
Mm-mm.
why it feels very timeless, I think, the way it's mounted. Rare for biopics or period dramas, you know. So
Absolutely.
the only thing that I felt this time was like Richard Goodwin is hamming it up a little bit. He is in a slightly different
Yeah.
movie. Like I can sort of feel again mouth. I can feel there's a lot of froth in the mouth. There's too
Hmm.
much. That was
You
my
you
only
love
thing.
looking at mouths. That should be maybe another episode we should do
I
on
kept thinking, you know
movies that
what? This
shaped our
guy
fascination with the
probably
mouth.
has bad breath because he's talking too loudly, too much, and the throat is drying up, the mouth is drying up. That's all
Oh,
I kept
okay.
thinking of, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
You should have been an orthodontist, I think.
Oh
Let's
no, no.
let's move on to your first love of Ray Fiennes. What do you have for us?
So my first love is Made in Manhattan from 2002, directed by Wayne Wang, starring Jennifer Lopez, Ray Fiennes, Natasha Richardson. Quick logline: a senatorial candidate falls for a hotel maid, thinking she is a socialite when he sees her trying on a wealthy woman's dress. Okay, fine.
That's the plot. That
That's the
is, yeah,
plot.
it's a little wordy, but that's the plot.
Yeah, it's me bringing another rom-com to the table because this is what a lot of what made it to India, but also what I watched. And I love rom-coms, especially
Hmm.
from the 90s and what year was this? Early 2000s. So
Yeah,
this
2002, I
is sort
think.
of right before things start to go terribly wrong with rom-coms. And this is not a great rom-com, but it's fine and enjoyable. But I do remember Rafe making an impression on me because of all the things we've been talking about, because he is touted as a leading man in the movie
Uh-huh.
who's supposed to be very attractive and alluring, on the right side of doing the right stuff. But there is something a little bit off with him. And you could say that maybe it doesn't work as a leading man, or I think it's a feature, not a bug. And there's something waspy and something just a little bit irritating about him in this movie, which I really caught on to right from the beginning. And that's what has defined kind of his persona to me. In fact,
Mm.
the quiz show guy could be in this movie, that same
Yeah,
character, actually,
actually, you're
you know,
right. Yeah,
who's
yeah. He goes on to
attractive,
become a senator now,
intelligent. Yeah,
and yeah.
all things are right on paper. I mean, I
Hmm.
don't think the question guy is a Republican. This one is, but who that doesn't matter to me anyway. Arbitrary things for the most part. But yeah, it's interesting to see him in that light. But I think Quiz Show is obviously, superior drama. It's serious as Robert Redford. This is in the sheen of a Jennifer Lopez rom-com. So it's kind of fun to see Rafe in that light because I don't think he's ever done something like this after that, even though his character is very much in conversation with other things that he's played. So that's what I love about him in this movie. Overall, I think, yeah, the movie may not age super well, what have you, but I think Jennifer Lopez is very good at this sort of stuff, and she holds the movie. Not everything fully comes together from a plot detail standpoint, but it has heart in it. You're in New York, you're in beautiful hotels, and good things might come your way. Who doesn't want that? I want that. It's all corny shit, but I like it.
So yeah, I'd never seen this before,
Of
and
course.
yeah, this is actually the second Wayne Wang romantic comedy that he also did. The Holiday that we talked about, I think, on one of our holiday episodes,
Yes.
that also did not work for me. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy this film very much, and I thought the thing that didn't work the most for me was Ray Fiennes.
It's
I'm
odd.
it's so I'm a big J-Lo fan. I've always liked her music, her especially her acting. So I was happy to see, okay, J-Lo romantic comedy. And I thought she did a very good job.
It's
She is
very
very
good.
good at playing the relatable working class character who has a lot of energy and on-screen presence. She had all of that, and I felt every time Rafe would come into the picture, he was like a wet blanket to be thrown over this energy of
Yeah.
Jennifer Lopez. Like he was like floundering around because I don't think there was much to this character other than good-looking guy who's chasing the more interesting, female lead of the movie, which is it's a classic, romantic comedy role for the man, and I just don't think Ray Fiennes fits in that. There needed to be more to his character, I think, to make it interesting to him, or at least have his persona come across. It just he was too bland, I felt in this. And I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. You mentioned he didn't really do anything after this, and I'm really not surprised. I think he realized that this was not the right type of vehicle for what he can bring to the stage, even though this movie was a hit. I remember when
Oh
this
yeah.
came out, this was not a flop at all. I think a lot of that, though, was due to J-Lo and her, like, this was sort of the beginning of her major phase as an actress and sort of being a leading woman. So I thought she maybe probably carried the box office a bit. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't like offensive to me, this
No.
film, but I felt it when J-Lo especially wasn't on the screen. I felt it was kind of a little bit boring. I mean, it's a typical Cinderella story, that
Yeah.
I do like Cinderella stories. In those can be really fun. A Cinderella Story with Hilary Duff is a fun movie that I like. But this, I don't know, something about Ray Fiennes, honestly, and this was odd. And was he supposed to have an American accent? Or was it supposed to be like
Yeah.
a Boston Brahmin kind of like upper
Yeah.
class accent? Because I just couldn't tell if he was supposed to be British because he's acting
It's
very
somewhere
like
in the middle. It's
erudite.
mid-Atlantic.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's that I was trying to figure out the entire time. Like, is he supposed to? But he's a senator, so maybe. So that was yeah, not the worst film I've ever seen, but
No.
it wasn't filled with enough romance or comedy actually for me to really. I just like following J-Lo. I'll
He's
I'll
great in
I'll
it.
watch
Yeah.
her on screen.
I love the Cinderella story part, but also you don't get to see the lives of the working class in
Hmm.
this kind of detail. I think they do a very good job. Again, if this movie were made today, it'll all be kind of very on the nose that, oh, class differences and what have you. And that's very much in the movie. But because they flesh out so much of her day-to-day life, her relationship with her son, her relationship with the other maids, and how the hierarchy in that world, kind of the downstairs of the hotel works. Like, it's very fleshed out, which I think
Hmm.
is very engaging and interesting. But yeah, I agree. Rafe is a little boring in the movie, but I don't know. The more I've seen this movie, and I have seen it a few times, I'm like, oh, maybe that's the point. Maybe they
Yeah.
were going for something different because anybody else could have played this part, and made it sing. Like
Yes.
Hugh Grant would
Right.
be great in this role, or whoever. Hugh Jackman would be great in this
Oh,
role.
Hugh Jackman would have been really,
It bring
yeah,
like
really
so
good
much
actually.
light and energy to it. But it's sort of interesting to see somebody like Rafe, who you would not expect in a movie like this, like attractive but a little bit creepy, a little bit boring
Hmm.
in this. So it makes it kind of different in my mind.
Hmm.
That's what I would say.
Okay. Well, speaking of different, and you've seen the movie a lot of times, so maybe you can explain this to me. Well, first off, I feel like I'm a big fan of the 90s romantic comedies. I like different types of romantic comedies and not really the 90s ones. But usually in these 90s movies, there's some super bizarre choice that the filmmakers tend to make. And in this movie, it was making Jennifer Lopez's, I don't know, 7 year old son be obsessed with Richard Nixon and the Nixon administration in a way that was like he's giving a Nixon speech. She's gifting him the Nixon tapes on CD to listen to. He's talking about, oh, Henry Kissinger, he's obsessed with him too. And there's sort of a moment in the end where it's almost like he's starting to say, well, Ray Fiennes, like, you made mistakes, but politicians make mistakes, and shouldn't we be forgiving everyone? Like, maybe we should be giving Richard Nixon for Watergate. Like, what
Oh my
in the
gosh,
hell
yeah.
was up with the 7 year old Nixon obsession subplot? Like, was the screenwriter part of the Nixon administration? He's like, you know what? Nixon was wrong. I gotta like make sure that Nixon is sort of like given a new image now. And like that was so bizarre. Why do you
So
think they did
bizarre.
that? Like, what was
I have
what's with
no
that?
clue. First when I saw it, I had no clue what this is about because I didn't really care about American parliament. I knew
Right.
Richard Nixon was, bad, but that
Right.
was sort of that.
Hmm.
I didn't pay much attention, but then yeah, it was like it's a lot. And then I was like, oh, maybe they're doing this because the kid has like an investigatory kind of mind, and he's obsessed with it because of how bad this was. But
It seemed like
then
he
it
liked him.
turns out he likes him.
Yeah, I
It's just
just
very odd.
so odd. And it's not like the movie sort of treats it like matter of fact, like, oh yeah, of course, like it's a 6 year old. Everyone goes through that Nixon phase, Like at some point you discover
Right.
Watergate and you love Nixon and Kissinger, and then you kind of grow out of it. It's like the movie doesn't make it into a joke. Like it's not set up to really be a gag per se. It's
No.
just so weird. But I don't know why. There's always this weird thing that in these 90s rom-coms, they have to drop in some just thing that I'm like, what was going on here? Like someone has an agenda. Someone has an agenda going on. It was
I'm on an
really funny.
agenda
And then
for
throw
sure.
Kissinger in there too. I mean, it's one thing Richard Nixon, but I mean, Kissinger's one of like the
Right.
evilest guys ever lived. Like, why are you
Yeah.
sort of, it's just weird. I just wanted to call that
Very
maybe
odd.
I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'll have to watch the movie a couple times to try to figure out the Richard
They
Nixon
could have
angle.
picked anybody else. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
yeah,
know.
race characters, Republican. You could have picked any other
Lincoln.
Republican, Lincoln, or
Abraham
anybody.
freaking Lincoln. That would have been a
Exactly.
normal thing for a kid to be. I was obsessed. I
Yeah.
mean, Lincoln's cool. He's a cool. He's got a
Yeah.
little hat and everything. Like, what is going on with Nixon? So weird. I just don't
Or
get it.
make it more investigatory, like this kid is obsessed because there's something off here.
Right.
That would have been interesting, but
Yeah,
I don't
he
think
loves
that's
all the president's men, and he's like, oh, like
right.
we gotta bring down politicians. So I'm suspicious of the Ray Fiennes character because he's a politician, and maybe they're all bad, like Nixon. And then at the end of the day, the kid learns, well, not all bad, or something like
Right.
that. That actually would make more sense. But I don't know if I ever meet the screenwriters, I'll be like, okay, guys, like angry Nixon voters. It seemed like to me, they're like Nixon was wronged is the message of Made in Manhattan. I don't know.
That is not a popular opinion by
I
any
oh, I know.
stretch.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's so odd to
So
me.
bizarre. Shall we move to our, shall I say, masterpieces?
Yes. Yeah, let's check out from one hotel and into another one. The
Oh,
masterpiece that I chose here was the Grand Budapest Hotel. So this is a film from 2014, directed by Wes Anderson. The plot summary, a writer encounters the owner of an aging, high-class hotel who tells him of his early years serving as a lobby boy in the hotel's glorious years under an exceptional concierge. So not only does it star Ray Fiennes, but also F. Murray Abraham, Bill Murray, Willem Dafoe, Adrian Brody, Jeff Goldblum, Jude Law. It's just like a ton of actors in a ensemble Wes Anderson film. So
mhm.
I we actually talked about this movie in a previous episode, which I'll post the link to below. It was one of your comfort movies in the comfort movie
Mhm.
episode. So we did discuss the film there, but this time I'll talk a little more about Ray Fiennes and then some other thoughts I have just on the film. And the reason why I think for me this is his masterpiece performance, the one that now whenever I think of Ray Fiennes, even though the first impression for me was Quiz Show, I always think of this role in Grand Budapest and a role that I don't think anyone else could have played. Is
Yeah.
it really is the this duality that we've been talking about of a veneer of a guy who looks like he's super classy and got kind of everything together, but really kind of doesn't. There's something else more going on there. Is this entire character that he plays at Gustav, where you don't really get a sense of his backstory, but he puts on these airs of like he follows the rules. He's all about etiquette and is super classy, very proper and things like that. But in these amazing scenes that he does, like at the drop of a hat, he'll just completely change into just a, I guess, I mean, not to like be classist or like more of like a lower class kind of like vulgar. He'll throw around swear words like all the time out of nowhere. Like one of my favorite transitions is when he, this woman he's been sleeping with passes away, gives him a painting that they're coming back. He gets the painting from her will reading. It's like, you know what? This painting, I love this. It'll always remind me of her. This is my most important possession. I want to be buried with it. And like a second later, it's like, you know what? Actually, let's sell this. The first time let's just immediately sell this painting. We got to get the money. We're gonna, and like that is just this duality. And he does that several times in the
Mhm.
film, like flipping between these two things. And I think that is just Ray Fiennes. That's his persona. That's what he's been kind of developing over the years in these other films we've even talked about today. And to me, he's Gustav is just he nails this role and brings sort of a heart to this character too, where you don't really understand a lot of his motivations. They talk a little bit about his backstory in one scene, but you and he gives so much in his performance that you can start filling in those blanks yourself that just make him such a rich character. So I know this is your masterpiece as well. So why did you choose this as your masterpiece for Rafe?
Yeah, like now it's Gustav is sort of etched in my brain as Rafe or the other way around.
Hmm.
It's everything you said, and I think I'll just add to it, which is it's the offness, but now it's played for comedy, but it's not zany.
Mm.
Maybe a little bit. And I think his comedic timing, physical comedy, but also line delivery, how he interacts with other characters in the movie, it's just pure gold. And it's so hard to do, and he makes it look so easy and effortless. And then as you kind of dig deeper into his character in the movie, yeah, you're not really sure, what are his motivations?
Right.
He's sort of tricking these older women, but he also provides a lot of comfort to them. He might be portraying to be of the upper sort of class, but he is a working class guy. He does take care of his people, even though he is very eccentric and demands a lot out of them. He's standing by the right thing, but he's also stealing things. So there's like
Hmm.
these dualities that are playing across the board. But at the end of it, what you're left with is his quirks, the perfume and all of it, but then just a really good heart too, like
Hmm.
he makes Zero's life in so many ways, but it's not done in a, oh, I'm saving you kind of way either, because there's just
Right.
so much like complexity and depth to him. So, yeah, this is just a masterpiece. Few actors get to kind of use all the colors in their box, if you will. And I'm just so happy that Wes Anderson found him, and especially in this later Wes Anderson period where there aren't like leads in the movie. And even though watching this movie again, I've watched it so many times, like Rafe is not in the movie a whole lot. Like he
Right.
disappears for a lot of it. And which is why I finally cracked that why he was not nominated for Best Actor. Because the movie is, even though it feels like he's in the whole movie, he isn't. I wish they would
Mm,
have campaigned him for Best Supporting Actor. That would have been a better choice. But this is just me and my
interesting.
Oscar nerdery. So it's a shame that he is not nominated for an Oscar for this movie, because it's such a, in my mind, like a monumental performance of the last 10 years, I
Yeah.
think. But yeah, this is just pure gold.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on the film itself, so we did a Wes Anderson episode, which I'll link below too. And he's been one of my favorite directors since high school, but I came of age with him. So for me, Rushmore and Tenenbaums are like really the two quintessential Anderson films. And I feel like this movie for folks younger than us, because we
Yeah.
are very old, that kind of came to age in the last 10 years, this seems to be their introduction to Wes Anderson. And this was their like Rushmore and their Royal Tenenbaums, where, it's put on the top of Wes Anderson lists all the time. And for a long time, I enjoyed this movie when I first saw it. And the more and more times I see it, it's starting to kind of land a little bit more because there is, in terms of the heart of what this movie is about, because there's so much of Wes Anderson's style involved in here. And sometimes, you can criticize him for style over substance. I think there's definitely substance there, but, this
Hmm.
movie has so much style. It's been hard for me to try to find kind of the substance in it. And it was really on this viewing, I think that the movie sort of purposely doesn't talk about what the movie's actually really trying to talk about, which is Zero's story about Agatha, which is the woman that he loved. And then he's trying to avoid talking about her so much. And to me, this movie really is actually about that. It's dealing with lost love and how you handle that, having the person that you're in love with die too young. And that seems to be to me what actually the message and the heart of this movie is, even though they put all these other things around it just because the narrator of the narrator. I guess there's it's kind of a Russian doll of
Oh
plot
yeah.
structure here, but the older Zero, F. Murray Abraham playing the older Zero, just doesn't want to talk about what he really does want to talk about, which is his love for Agatha, and he's sort of he's trying to put an illusion up that it's fine, I'm okay, like I've moved on, like this isn't bothering me anymore, in the same way that Ray Fiennes' character is putting this illusion up of this class or this society that is potentially gone because of this, the World War II that happens in this movie. But on this viewing, it kind of landed on me. Yeah, this movie's really about the love that he had for, or still has actually, for Agatha, not being able to get over that, even though he's trying to pretend that he is, and that loss just is with you forever.
Yeah, that's a great read on it. I didn't think about it in that depth, but I think it's totally right. And of course, underscored by fascism and
Right.
the loss of an era and all of those things. But yeah, the center of it is that love and yeah, I mean, now that it clicks in for me, as you say it, is that when the movie starts, there's just such deep loneliness
Mm-hmm.
in the hotel, but also in F. Murray Abraham's character, the way he talks to Jude Law, and there's just like a stillness and like a haunting sort of quality. And yeah, you can take it as that, yeah, Gustav isn't there, and the old charms and the old sort of splendor and glory of the hotel are no longer there. But it's really about the fact that Agatha isn't there, and
Right.
somebody who you lost when they were so young. That memory, I think, is then juxtaposed with the affection and just being seeing quality that Zero got from Gustav. And that's why he comes and always sleeps in that little room, even though he owns the hotel, because it takes him back to that place of being in love, but being cared for by Gustav, being taught, mentored. Like the scenes between young Zero and Gustav, not only are they fun, but they're also moving. Like the
Oh
first
yeah.
few times when I saw the movie, I would always end up crying, though, in that, scenes in the train when Gustav stands up for him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They're very moving, or even just like the little banter between them, or when Gustav escapes from the prison and Zero is there with all the perfume and everything for him. Just like the little detail like this, In fact, that's the true love story of the movie as well. So
What?
maybe there's mourning of the fact that Gustav isn't there, but also the fact that Agatha isn't there.
Yeah, I sort of take it too as maybe F. Murray Abraham can't talk about Agatha at all. So the other loss he can talk about is Gustav, because it's easier for him to talk about lost love with his plutonic love for his
Right.
friend and his mentor, as opposed to love for Agatha because he just can't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that scene, I love that scene too. Speaking of like the quick transitions when Gustav gets so angry at Zero for not bringing the perfume after
Yeah.
they escape, and he's railing at him, he was like, "How'd you come here, you know, dirty immigrant? What the hell? Why'd you even come here?" And he's like, "Oh, everyone died in a war. Like my whole family was tortured. I had to flee." And then immediately Gustav's like, "Oh my God, I take back everything I just said. I'm so sorry. You're amazing." And they're like, "Oh," and then they start shooting. I'm like, "Well, we'll carry this on later, but I want to hear more about your background." And then they kind of run away. That scene too is like really moving in a way. It's like he's
Yeah.
lashing out at his friend, and you know, friends get in fights
Right.
all the time, and but you sort of forget like what you know that you guys still love each other, and I just love
Exactly.
that moment too.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just very moving. And you said this is where Wes Anderson's sort of Russian doll, hyper kind of art design focus movies really start. Like before this, that wasn't. I mean, like it was happening a little bit before, but like
A
this is
little.
where it really kind of goes on steroids. And I think this is the best manifestation of it. Like all
Hmm.
the stop motion and the creation of the hotel, all the skiing scenes and the
Oh, I
chase
love
scenes
those.
and the prison. Like this movie has everything, but yet it has story and yet it has heart. It's just such a enjoyable movie, and that's why it was such a big hit. I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
so
yeah.
glad that he has that on his portfolio of this like massive hit blockbuster movie, which I who knew if he would ever have that. So I'm happy that he does.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder too if, you know, the reason why I didn't, it was harder for me to connect on this film at an emotional level because of all the
Oh yeah.
aspects you just talked about. I wonder if that is just also part of this theme of
Yeah.
the character can't talk about this loss, so he dresses it up in all these things and has to separate himself from this like lost love, which is really the key to this film. And it's you have to kind of go through all like open up the Russian doll and go all the way down to the little one in the end
Yeah.
at the bottom, and so you realize that, and you have to put the effort in, and that's why the more times I see this movie, the higher it gets in my Wes Anderson ranking, and the more it moves me. Even though when I first saw it, I loved it, but it was more I loved the craft of it. And the
Right.
score is great and the acting is great, but I couldn't really latch onto the emotional core of the film. And only now, in rewatching it so many times over the last 10 years, I guess the movie's now that old, it's starting to open itself up to me. And especially on this last viewing, for some reason, it really clicked of like, oh, this movie's actually all about Agatha, which is funny because I was going into this movie watching it for Ray Fiennes' performance. I was focused so much more on Gustav this time more than any other else because it's like, okay, I want to talk about how Ray Fiennes, and for some reason that focus immediately and realized like, oh, actually the movie's about this other thing. I don't know. Rewatching movies is great. I love rewatching movies. Even if I don't really like it a lot, I'll rewatch a movie again, and sometimes it just clicks in
You
another level, and
discover
that's
new
what makes
things.
movies so special, especially movies like this.
Yeah, I think that's in there for sure. To me, the movie is the love story between Zero and Gustav. Like
Hmm.
that is the main theme of the movie for sure. But then, yeah, there's that too. There's an Agatha piece in there as well for sure. Yeah, I think it's West too. Probably. I think this is who he is now. Like all of his
Yeah.
movies after this are very deep, but on first viewing they may not reveal everything. Like Asteroid City is just so deep and so complex that I
Hmm.
I can't wait to rewatch it. I loved it the first time, but it has a lot more on his mind that finally I know and I hope that I'll get to kind of the core of it.
Yeah, and that's always been a theme as we talked about in the Wes Anderson episode we did too. It's like this theme of loss and trying to like
Yeah,
paper over an emotional pain that you had, especially from your childhood or something. It's like ignoring that and what that does to you and the people around you, and not
yeah,
addressing your pain. And maybe now he's just burying it more in his films under all of this artifice of his amazing style and eye and camera movements and set designs. And yeah, this
right,
movie, especially all the different techniques, is just with the stop motion, like you mentioned. I think after he did Fantastic Mr. Fox, he's like, oh, now
right.
there's a new tool in my tool chest. I'm going to use this when I want to serve the story. And it's just fantastic film. I just really, really enjoy this movie. And I do think it's Rafe's greatest performance.
I agree. Should we get to our wild cards? Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'll start with my wild card for Ray Fiennes. My wild card is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So this is the fourth in the Harry Potter franchise, and the first one with Ray Fiennes to appear as Voldemort. It's from 2005. The IMDb plot summary: Harry Potter finds himself competing in a hazardous tournament between rival schools of magic, but he is distracted by reoccurring nightmares. It's directed by Mike Newell, starring Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Rupert Grint, the entire Harry Potter cast of characters and actors, and then Ray Fiennes in his first appearance in the franchise. So why I picked this for Ray Fiennes' wild card? I mean, first off, I felt I had to discuss Harry Potter in this episode. If you're talking about Ray Fiennes, like Voldemort is a role that he will always be associated with. And this is the first appearance of him, and he isn't really in these movies very much until the final one, and then this one, I think, are the two that he has the most on-screen appearance in. Though his performance is so strong, it sort of weaves through the next couple films, even though he's not really in them very much. But I think for him, this was a big choice to enter into a franchise. And really, to me, this is when he decided, or at least this is when I started viewing him. Look, he is a character actor. He came up in the 90s. They were trying to put him in a lot of these leading man roles, English Patient, The Avengers. I guess Quiz Show doesn't really count. That was when he was kind of getting started. And even the romantic comedies, like we mentioned, the Maid in Manhattans, and then he just joining Harry Potter to me is a symbol, as a sign that you are a amazing British character actor, because that's all other than the three lead kids. That's all that the cast is just stacked with. Just some of the best British actors of the last 20 years, and now he's joining that pantheon of saying, you know what, I don't need to be a leading man in everything. I am now making this choice to become now the lead villain in this massive franchise. But he has the acting chops like most of these actors do in these Harry Potter movies. I'm not getting overwhelmed by the franchise. He still brings an incredibly compelling performance in Voldemort to this movie. You can tell his acting chops, what that duality that we've been talking about comes across even through the makeup. It's simple makeup. They do erase his nose, which is a key feature of his face, I guess, for you, or that distance, right? We're talking about. And they take away his hair, even though I guess time did that to him a little bit too. But he's under some makeup, and sometimes you get lost in that, and you're playing a character that very easily could be overdone, pantomime, if you will. But I think he does a fantastic job, especially in this movie, with capturing really the evil, but like the slick evil of who Voldemort is and how he is so appealing to these
Yeah.
wizards in terms of going back to this darker, kind of very Nazi coded time, and he's very
Yeah.
much the wizard Hitler. So I think he is able to bring something to this role from his own acting performance, not get swallowed up, enter in a franchise, and still be a standout in terms of performances, which this franchise has so many of those. And I think it's really just due to his talents as a performer and what he's able to do. And I'll talk more about the movie, which is my favorite Harry Potter movie, in a bit. You saw the movie when it came out, and what were your thoughts
Oh
on seeing
yeah.
Voldemort on screen for the first time?
I mean, all the anticipation that's sort of building up to this movie of who is he and what would he look like and how would he show up? Like it's delivered and then some with
Hmm.
Rafe inhabiting it. And it sort of makes sense, right? Whoever had this genius idea to cast him, even though he was resistant, I've heard him talk in interviews that somebody from his family was like, "You kidding to be saying no to this? Like, you got to take this," because he didn't want to, which I understand. Like, if you're a serious actor, you don't want to be in sort of this sort of franchise world, perhaps. But
Right, right.
I think it was a stroke of genius for whoever thought him for this part, because yeah, it's all the things that we've been saying, but now in this scenario, just like with Schindler's List, like the evil is dialed up,
Hmm.
but there is still that seductive quality that everybody is sort of drawn to it, maybe even hypnotized by it through magic in this case. But he is a very powerful being, and that sort of looms large, and you can't escape it. And he grounds that, because this, again, to your point, it could have been like there's no mustache involved here, but it could have been like a mustache twirling, really
Absolutely.
big, loud performance. But instead, it's sort of snake like and slithering
Yeah.
kind of performance. It's quieter, but it has its big moments. And it feels like classically trained British actor doing this, but also doing it for the screen. Like it doesn't
Yes.
feel like a, theatrical play like performance that somebody might do at, a Shakespearean performance. It has elements of that, but it's very much for the screen. It lends itself beautifully to all the makeup and all the green screen. There's so much of all that wizardry going around him, but you never lose him in that.
Right.
And I agree, like, there's a bit of the character actor element to it, like you were saying earlier, but it's Voldemort. It's still lead villain. All roads lead to him in terms
Hmm.
of who did this, why are we in this place in the first place. It's all him. So in my mind, he is one of the leads of the movie, even though he's barely in it. You
Hmm.
can't have Harry Potter without him, actually.
Yeah, literally, because the spell, the killing the parents, getting he
Yeah,
gave him the scar, like all
yeah,
that stuff. Yeah, you
all
literally
of
couldn't
it.
have. Yeah,
So he's the
exactly.
lead of the movie in many
Mm.
ways, I think.
We talked about one Harry Potter movie before, but I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, though I didn't read the books until after the movies. So I didn't actually know anything about what was going to happen in this in terms of Voldemort showing up, what he was going to look like. I mean, my friends who read the books obviously knew this was going to happen and, knew the descriptions of how Voldemort was going to be.
Mm,
So to me, it was a total surprise and one that was handled incredibly well, not only just by the filmmakers, but also, again, about Ray Fiennes' performance because you hear about Voldemort, you see him as a young kid in the second film as a ghost, and you hear all about this guy and what he is, but in your mind it could be built up to something that isn't delivered on screen. And I think how the film handles that reveal of Voldemort, but then also what Ray Fiennes is able to bring to that role, for me at least, as someone who had him built up in my mind because I didn't have any other thing to go off of, he exceeded expectations in terms of how
yeah.
creepy, evil, powerful, why you understand, oh yeah, I get why people are following this guy. And you get
Yeah.
that he has this anger and that's where his prejudice is coming from too. It's not just, oh, he's born evil and he's just an evil
Right.
guy. Like, no, this is a person who's gone through things that have shifted his worldview into one of hate and prejudice and
Hmm.
bigotry and all these things that Voldemort represents.
Hmm. I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, the material is super rich, but obviously he brings a lot to it. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought this. I would have brought it if you hadn't. Like, it has to be mentioned. And it
Hmm.
is a wild card choice because he almost didn't do it.
Right.
It doesn't sort of really stack up and in his career, but I'm so glad that he did. I
Yeah, and
can't
it's
imagine anybody else doing this part. Who
abs
would? Who could?
absolutely not. Well, we'll find out because they're remaking it for TV.
Oh
So, blah,
yeah.
blah,
Oh my
blah. But
gosh.
other than
Yeah.
that, yeah, who could do this? But I'll
Yeah.
also say, this is my favorite Harry Potter film. I think this movie, within all the Potters, I love the story of all the coming of age stuff is dialed up, but then also there's this sense of dread of Voldemort
Mhm.
coming. Like, at this age, you're about to enter adulthood, and you just kind of sense it. And there's this adult world that, for the very first time, Harry's dealing with reality that's also impacting the adults as opposed to kid challenges that he's kind of
Right.
overcoming. I also feel that Mike Newell just did a fantastic job in directing this
Mhm.
thing. This movie, every time I see it, to me, looks like the most expensive of all the Harry Potter movies. So much of it is filmed on location. The sets are very opulent. The effects are just incredible. And before and even after this, well, maybe the Azkaban was notwithstanding because
Yeah.
of what Cuarón brought into it, Alfonso Cuarón, but it just they don't seem to be like look this good. I don't know what he did, but something about this just looks grand and big and epic, and the effects still stand out so well. So this to me is the Potter movie I enjoy the most, and I can kind of watch on its own sometimes because it
Mhm.
is so self-contained. It's just fun to see the kids at their first dance and like their first
Right.
love and all that stuff. Because I love coming of age stories, and obviously all the Harry Potters are coming of age, but this is the most interesting to me coming of age. It's like that one year where everything starts becoming real for the first time in terms of, yeah, you know what, I am going to be an adult at some point, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of excited about that, even though it's a scary world, and that's to me what makes this movie so fun. And like the lore is there in the background, but it really is just about the kids and what they're going through.
Right.
What do you enjoy this film? It's just a Harry Potter movie.
I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so when the movie's fan, I'm not much of a reader, so sadly I haven't read the books. I'm not like I didn't dress up as Harry Potter or anything like that, but
Hmm.
of all the franchises, I would say maybe leaving Bond,
Hmm.
probably this is up there for me in terms of what I would sort of pick up and watch. But to me, the first movie in the series is that it's that
That's your
comfort
favorite one
watch.
to you.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is just so comfortable, and I love them as kids, and you're being introduced to the new world,
Yeah.
and they just did such an amazing job, and Christopher Columbus is just so good with it to kind of put you back in that ship. Even though I know how everything works, I'm always surprised by all the things that happen in the
Mm.
movie.
Oh
That's
yeah.
sort of the genius of that. So yeah, but this is amazing too.
Yeah, we covered the first Harry
Yeah,
Potter
we
film. I'll
did.
post a link below in case people want to hear our thoughts on Sorcerer's Stone. It's a great franchise. I think it'll go down in history as one of the best made and best acted, and Rafe is a part of that forever.
Yeah.
Okay, so leaving Wizarding World of Harry Potter, what is your wild card for Rafe Fiennes? Let's finish it up.
All right. So my wild card is A Bigger Splash. from 2015, directed by Luca Guadagnino, starring Tilda Swinton, Matthias Schoenaerts, Ralph Fiennes, Dakota Johnson. Quick logline: a famous rock star's vacation in Italy with a boyfriend is disrupted by the unexpected visit of an old friend and his daughter. So after Call Me by Your Name, which I really liked, and then I saw I'm Loved by Luca as well, I was like, okay, whatever he does next, I have to go and see it. And then with this cast, I was like, oh, absolutely. So I watched it. I remember the week it came out in theaters, and was absolutely blown away by this movie. And we'll talk about the movie separately. But
Hmm.
I think we've been teetering off on that edge with Rafe in terms
Hmm.
of attractive, seductive, but something off. This is the movie where that off is sort of dialed up all the way to just zany. And I've never seen him so physical in a movie. I mean, really, a lot of him is in the movie,
Yeah, you
if you
see
know what I
Voldemort's
mean.
wand in this movie
That is true.
a couple
Exactly.
times.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, I think the commitment that he has to this person and this character who's sort of like a lightning bolt, the moment they come in, everybody is attracted, can't escape him, but also utterly irritated by who this person is. And that energy just never goes down. Like he is on like a coke hamster wheel. Like this never stops. Like, oh, we're doing this now. And I feel like I know a version of this person in my life. We all know somebody like that in our lives who
Yeah,
is super fun, love to be around, but annoying and irritating and exhausting, but also
right.
broken from
Hmm.
the inside, and really insecure. And this is all a facade, like what we've been talking about with him. There's always a facade of some sort. And I could have almost put this movie as his masterpiece because this
Mm.
performance is just so lived in, and it's just so hard, I think, to do something like this. But Gustav takes the cake because it's the most rewatchable. I can handle this guy only to a point. Yeah, I'll get into the movie a little bit more, but curious if you'd watched the movie before.
No, I'd not seen this. I think I
I
have,
figured.
yeah, I'm the exact opposite when it comes to Luca. I feel like you've brought two of his movies to
Yeah,
the podcast, and I've not really liked either of them, though this one I liked more, mainly due to Rafe. And I think
yeah,
that you're right. This is almost like a sort of like a silly, wild, really out there performance that could feel very fake if it wasn't handled by what Rafe is able to do. Like you said, there's something else going on here that is behind why he's acting out in this way. Still, as like, an older man, he's acting like a 15-year-old kind of like, oh, let's wild and party all the time. It's like, okay, well, there's something behind that. And as the movie goes on, you slowly kind of get bits and pieces of what is beneath the surface of this character. But it's something I've never seen him do before in
no,
terms of this type of role. Usually he's the more kind of high class, sophisticated. Even with it's a Gustav, he goes between the two, but at least he has that sophisticated air. And in this movie, he's just playing a wild, like rock and roll producer who just is off the chain all the time, and he's always on 11, and he never dials it back. And that was really fun to see what he'll do. Like at first, I was like, where's this movie gonna go? Because he's an element that is just thrown in this X element of like disrupting this vacation where the Tilda Swinton's character can't even talk, so it's like super silent, and then
yeah,
this like X Factor thing just comes in and blows it all up. It actually, for the first part of the movie, it reminded me of the Sexy Beast movie. I don't know if you saw that. Like two
uh-huh,
gangsters on a gangster and his wife on vacation, and then gets the crazy element to kind of drop in and disrupt it. I felt like that was okay. Well, where's this going to go? And it kept me guessing the whole time in terms of what they're going to reveal about what actually was going on. It's a lot of the movie about desire, and again, we'll kind of get into that in a sec about the whole movie. But I think for me, this movie was only interesting and not boring because of Rafe's performance being so, yeah, like cool, I guess. Like I thought he was a cool guy. I'm like, I want to hang out with this guy. He's playing the Stones records, like he's dancing around. He's okay with nudity
great
sometimes.
Stone
Like,
songs.
oh, absolutely great soundtrack because this
I
is not a
mean,
lot of the classic 60s stuff. It's like 70s, 90s Stones. I'm a huge Stones guy, so it's like, oh, this is great. Like the music, the needle drops are just so
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 good.
well
I
done
mean,
in this.
now Emotional Rescue in my head is etched with rave dancing. I can, and there's the story with the drum or whatever trash bin.
Oh
I don't know if
yeah.
that's true that he shows in the movie. It's just so cool.
You never think that someone could dance to a Stone song in a weirder way than Mick Jagger could, but
Yeah.
he found a way. He found a way,
So good. Yeah, no, I mean, he's obviously great, but I have a lot of fondness for the movie of what it's trying to do. Like, it's just so clever. First of all, like making Tilda recovering from like this throat thing, even though she's a rock star, has a whole different life, and they're totally quiet. And just the relationship dynamics that are playing across between these four people. Like, you can see that Tilda, their flashbacks, like Tilda and Rafe had a totally different life. They were together
hmm
earlier.
hmm
And the way that sort of is kind of etched in the fabric of the movie is so interesting. Like, it's almost like she made a choice to have a different life, even
Right.
though she is a rock star and is literally now taking a backseat because it's sort of gotten too much. And her current boyfriend or partner in Matthias is sort of all about caring for her and having, making sure you take your medicine and you don't talk and this and that. But that beast that used to be still within her. And it's
hmm
almost like Rafe comes and kind of disrupts that and kind of flames that out. But then it turns out his daughter, played by Dakota Johnson, which I think is one of her best performances too.
Yeah,
Because up till
she's
then,
great.
I was like, who is this person? I don't quite get her. But she's just so magnetic and kind of snake like, but also cool in this movie that she just doesn't have to do much. And she does it all by just like her glances and her body language. And it turns out, Matthias, who's kind of playing this guy who's like very stable and supportive, turns out that's all a facade too.
hmm
And maybe it's Rafe, maybe it's the past relationship that Rafe and Tilda had, this jealousy there because that relationship is sort of coming to the fold. And the fact that Rafe and Matthias were friends way back when, I think
Yeah.
there's jealousy there as well. And then, not to mention, Dakota comes in and kind of stirs the pot even further. There's desire, younger woman, this and that. It turns out Matthias is the one who ends up being the most unhinged at the end.
hmm
And I probably shouldn't spoil what happens because I don't know if many people have seen this movie, but it's just such a twisty, windy road on where it goes, but also just character study. Not to mention, it's all staged in this place, which is beautiful, but also kind of crumbling. There's also the migrant crisis that's happening. You hear that from the TV. You see people who are coming from wherever. Meanwhile, these people are in the lap of luxury. So there's like so many elements that are at play in this movie. It requires actually several rewatches to kind of fully understand all of it. But at first, it's all Rafe, and it's this beautiful location they're in, and all the great food they're eating. Because there's always great food in Lucas movies.
Yeah, the definitely the setting and the food for sure was very desirable. Like he was very
Yeah,
good at setting the scene. Like you feel like you're there in, that Italian town. You feel the sun. I think they do a
yeah,
very good job. And I remember this also, like you said, from Call Me by Your Name in terms of just capturing a setting and feeling like you're there in sort of like a Terrence
yeah,
Malick type of way. I definitely felt
yeah.
that in this
I
too.
mean,
But yeah.
he's become like, I think, the director of desire now, whether
hmm
it's sexual or art, food, location. Like, there's nobody else who can capture that. In the movie Challenges also is that, it's all about desire that came out this year. So
Yeah, I
sorry to
haven't.
cut to you, but like, yeah,
No, you haven't seen that yet. I should. I've heard good things about it
yeah,
though.
it's
Again,
good.
going into it now, I'll be, thinking I might not like it, but that's fine. Like with Conclave, I didn't like his last film. I walked in and ended up loving it. So, I always have to carry my expectations, but kind of recognize them too going into it. But yeah, it I kind of got, yeah, it was sort of like desire, sort of like an eyes wide shut, sort of like what is in a marriage, what happens when you desire someone outside of your partner, and then Rafe's character coming back. It just, I don't know, something about it was just too boring, I guess. Like I wasn't interested in
Oh,
really what was going on, other than the locations were cool and Rafe was cool, but the actual like machinations of the plot just moved too slowly for me, and so it wasn't something I guess I just don't connect to this guy as
yeah.
much as you do clearly, but. Rafe was
Yeah,
definitely wild. I'll
wild,
say that.
hence wild card.
Exact. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
have to be in the headspace and mood for a movie like this. Like, I don't think I could watch this any time of the day or any day of the week. Like,
Right.
it is a slow burn. You have to kind of luxuriate just the way these people are luxuriating in this place.
Hmm.
And I can be in that mindset only, sometimes. So,
Yeah.
but when I am, it really clicks and all of it works. But yeah, he is the standout of the movie. And I'm so glad that he has this in his repertoire of amazing performances.
Yeah. Exactly. And I just curious to see like if he'll kind of go back to working with this director again at some point. It's
Yeah.
because it seemed like this is the only time he's been this crazy to me. Like he seems to
Yeah.
be very like, I'm just gonna do some wild thing, and I don't know how Luca works in terms of how much freedom he gives his actors on set or to develop their characters, but you definitely could tell Rafe was having fun with doing this because it's a performance that he hasn't really had the opportunity to do anything this kind of completely like unbuttoned before.
Yeah. I mean, the In Bruges stuff is a little bit sort of,
Yeah, yeah, ish.
off and kind of wild, but like this rig really takes it all the way. Speaking of, what would you like to see Rafe do next?
Well, I do want a sequel to Conclave. I want to know what happened. I want to be in that world. I just really love that movie. Beyond Conclave 2, I think in this rewatch and just thinking more about Rafe and where he is in his career now, I really think he has great comedy chops. Even some of
Yeah.
the scenes in Bigger Splash, he brings like a comedic edge to this movie. And we talked about Grand Budapest, and he obviously is that is a comedy. And I'd like to see him do another comedy. And I think he has a lot of those instincts and can be very funny. Even in something like The Menu, which is more like a dark comedy, he brings like this a little bit of a comedic edge to it. So I'd love to see him do more of an out and out comedy similar to like a Grand Budapest Hotel again, but maybe something even more broad. I mean, he showed in Bigger Splash he could
Mhm.
go a little bit more broad. I think that would be really fun to see.
That's a good one. I sort of will go the opposite because I feel like I've been seeing him and do a lot of comedy. When Hail Caesar, he's so good in
Oh, he's
it. Like
so
he's
good in
a
that. Yeah. Just as a bit
broad
part though. I want him to lead
bit
lead the
part,
film.
but lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would like him to do like a contemporary movie and maybe try his hand at like a romantic drama.
Hmm.
I don't think he's really done that a lot. And maybe it'll be fun as an older person with like an older, you know, person playing off of it next to him.
Hmm.
It'll be fun to see him do something like that. So that's what I would say. Because I always see him in more period, even
Mm.
though he does contemporary. So it was watching Biggest Flash made me think, well, I haven't seen him in like shorts and wearing like a Hawaiian shirt. I don't associate that with him at all.
Yeah.
So I think that would be fun to see him do. Yeah.
Yeah, or even Conclave, which was contemporary, but because they're in the
Yeah.
robes of the Catholic Church, it feels almost like that discussion could have happened at any
Any
point in the
point in
Catholic
time.
Church's history. It didn't necessarily have to be contemporary. So that's a really good point. It was fun to see him in that setting in Bigger Splash. So hopefully he'll do that again in the future. So speaking of future then too, why don't you talk to listeners about what we have coming up in our next episode and who we are going to be talking about?
Yeah, so in the next episode, we'll be talking about the one and only the great Tom Hanks, because he has a new movie coming up called Here, directed by Zemeckis. So, yeah, excited to talk about him and a little bit skeptical on this movie and to see what it would be like. But I'm still very, very amped up because, it seems like an experiment that could pay off or could be terrible.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same mind. Very cautious about the film. I think Zemeckis has kind of strayed over the last
Yeah,
like 10 to 20 years, so it'll be interesting to see kind of reuniting with Hanks if they can bring something interesting to the table. But I'm intrigued, and I think it'll be fun to talk about also Tom Hanks, who's obviously one of the biggest stars that Hollywood has ever had, and I think there's a lot of
yeah.
interesting discussion we'll have and a lot of fun movies to talk about that Tom Hanks has been in. So that'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully, listeners will be tuning in 2 weeks to hear us talk about Tom Hanks.
All right, so that was our episode. We hope you enjoyed our discussion on Rafe and Conclave. Please leave in the comments below what you thought about the movie, what you thought about Rafe's performances that we covered, and maybe the other performances that you like that we didn't cover. As always, we are available here on YouTube, but all the other podcasting platforms. So please don't forget to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, because that really helps new listeners find us. Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye. I should send you this, but I was kidding about all the costumes and stuff, obviously in my Conclave screening. But someone did post at the Burbank AMC, there was people in the lobby dressed in like full cardinal outfits with those giant hats going to Conclave. So there are
Wow.
Conclave heads out there. Obviously not at my screening, but I thought that was kind of funny. People are really getting into this.
Wow.
This is the new big franchise. It's all about the Conclaves.
That's amazing. Who knew?